Hey everyone, I'm Brad and this is Watch, Rate, Heart. And it's the start of a new week where I not only review films, I also share the thoughts of the Letterboxd community. And next Monday is Memorial Day, and to celebrate the holiday, I wanted to watch movies that are centered around the military. I've got 4 films about soldiers, war, battle, and otherwise, so let's get locked and loaded for the first review. A gritty, bloody World War II drama. This is the David Ayer written and directed film Fury, starring Brad Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, John Barenthal, and Michael Pena. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.8 out of 5, an IMDb of 7.6 out of 10, a Rotten Tomatoes of 75% fresh, and Metacritic of 64, and it has no accolades as of this time. Okay, Fury. I am pretty disappointed by it. I'll just get the positive right off the bat. Action solid, cast is good. That's it. That's all I can give you. The action's really not bad. It's good, but it's about as standard as I would expect from a war movie made today, or made in the past 20 years. So, yeah, the action's fine. It's solid. I have a number of issues with the film, but really they all center around a big thing. And the big thing is that the film tries to be so many different types of war movies with not enough detail to satisfy any. And I'll get into it in a little depth here. Of course, if you watch the trailers, you look at scenes of the film, it's got a very grim, dark, very muted gray tone to it that is reminiscent of films like Saving Private Ryan. You're expecting a very grisly, gritty type of World War II action film. And basically that is what the film is visually. It also tries to be a story about a group of soldiers who are dealing with the mental toll of being in war. And then it adds another trope about a soldier who's not meant to be a soldier. There's that story as well. And then there's another story where it's how inhumane you have to be in order to survive war. And then there's another story where they double back on the horrible behavior of the soldiers, but by also showing that they're good people after all. So there's like a brotherhood bond thing going on. And then there's another thing that they add, which is the visceral, grisly, bloody, brutal violence in the film, which honestly, I take all of that and say none of that affected me at all in this film. Not even the violence. And I'm somebody who gets really squeamish with bloody, gory violence. And I felt nothing. Not even disgust. Not even like, oh my God. I just was like, yeah, okay. That's essentially what I was when watching this film. I was like, yeah, okay, I see what you're doing. But my big problem with the film is that it tries to do so many things. And I can't say it fails at it, but it does it with a load of tropes that, again, are successful to a certain extent, but they're done so lazily that I can only look at and go, they executed that trope effectively, but they're not administering any kind of emotional connection or really any kind of emotion at all to me to where I can get invested. Nothing in the story is doing anything for me. And that's because everything that the film does has been done before in other stories, in other movies, in other TV shows, and they're done much more effectively. Even the violence, which is visceral and brutal and gory and bloody, didn't do anything for me. Like, it really did nothing. I just watched it and went, yeah, that's pretty bloody, all right. Like in the first few minutes of the movie, there's a scene where the soldier who is not really meant to be a soldier is in the tank cleaning up the blood and the viscera of somebody who died in another seat, and he literally picks up a piece of the guy's face. And I looked at that and went, huh, okay. Normally, if I saw that, I would be like, oh, God. Blech. When watching this, I was like, all right. It's like, that's disgusting, but okay. And I don't think I'm being desensitized. I think the film itself desensitizes the violence, and I don't think it means to. It wants to shock you. It presupposes that you will be shocked and horrified by what you're watching. And a lot of things that the film is trying to be is succeeding because it shows what other films have done. It's trying to be anti-war, anti-violence, but then pro-violence, pro-war, pro-military, pro-brotherhood, all that stuff. But they do it by implementing all these well-worn tropes to a point where it's just not all that interesting. And it's not all that captivating of a story. So my feeling of Fury is that Does it execute on those tropes well? Yes. But it doesn't use those tropes for a greater purpose. And by the time that the film ended at around 2 hours and 15 minutes, yeah, that's about what I expected from the film. And that's not really what you want from a film like this. You want someone to be moved or disgusted or have some kind of reaction to the film. And all it is just, yep, that's probably what happened. And that's really not the way to do it. And with that, I overall just did not like the film, which is a shame because I can see how well it's executed, except for the intangibles that it needs to execute a great story. This tries very hard to be several different films. I think Saving Private Ryan is one thing it's really trying to be, and it just fails on a lot of things to do that. So, not a bad movie per se, but not one that I would recommend. Now, in every episode of Watch, Rate, Heart, I not only give you my opinion of the films I'm watching, but I also give the opinions of the Letterboxd community. And this first one is from Arthur Chappell. Arthur gives it 3 stars out of 5, and Arthur says, Das Boot, with an American tank crew approaching Berlin in 1945. This veers between genuine tension and war movie cliche, even with the classic guy throwing himself on a grenade to save his buddies scene. The 3 leads, especially Brad Pitt, play their roles very well, and the tank battle scenes are very well done. I also like the scene where they meet 2 German sisters and try to protect them even from their own men. The tragic finale is devastating. The film is based on fact, acknowledging that the Germans had better tanks than the Americans, who lost a great many tanks in the combat. The claustrophobia of the tank cabin and difficulties in escaping a burning tank are very much central to this film. I didn't feel the claustrophobia or tension at all in the film. I think if you're into military history and you're into tanks specifically, I think I can understand why you would see that and might be affected by that. I think there are just so many cliches in this film that it was too distracting to get really sucked into anything. I will say that the action scenes are good, though, and that the leads were good, so I will agree on that end. This next review is from Henry Legenza. Henry gives it 4 stars out of 5, and Henry says, "We all know war is hell and innocence is the first victim. Both of these are on display in this solid World War II action drama. This is shades of the old-fashioned war movies with some of the heroics, but it also has a moral conscience. It's a bit cliched, predictable, and a tad overlong, but the action scenes are great, and Pitt fits the role perfectly. It is very cliched and predictable, and yes, I would say it's a little overlong. For me, it's overlong because I kind of knew where everything was going to go, and it just didn't interest me at all in that. Even the moral conscience stuff, I think, is a little muddied in the film with the way it's presenting it. This next review is from Cinephile A. Cinephile A gives it 2.5 stars out of 5, and Cinephile A says, "The film was fine until that last battle. 5 versus an entire army? Suddenly it's Marvel, not a war movie." I can understand that thought process to a certain extent, but I can also kind of believe that it was hard for a group of people who did not have a tank to have such a hard time fighting a tank, even if it was broken, just with the raw firepower that's in the tank. So, on the one hand, I can see where he's coming from. It does seem a little bit silly, but on the other hand, I can't exactly say that I think it's actually false. And finally, this last review is from Movies for Granted. Granted gives it 3.5 stars out of 5, and Granted says, "The tank sequences keep me coming back to this, as well as the star-studded cast. That final tank sequence is evidence enough for both aspects shining the most. Gives us heroes that makes you wonder about what war does to thin the line between good and evil. That dinner scene is well executed and pulls out a ton of emotions from me. I do like Bible's whole thing about how his religion will weave into the group, and what happens with Emma. I'll just be honest, this movie was just not effective for me at all, but it's nice to see some reviews that clearly feel the opposite way. So, in review, I think the action is solid, if not infrequent. The main cast is good for what it is, but this film tried to be an everything war movie, from the gritty war is hell trope, to the soldier not a soldier sequence, to the brotherhood of personalities, and anti-war, and it doesn't succeed in any of those tropes. I also think the strong, bloody, and grisly violence is ineffective. It doesn't shock or startle, it just kind of feels there for me. Overall, I'm going to give Fury 2 stars out of 5. I can't say it's an unsuccessful film or a bad film. I just think it loads on so many tropes and cliches. It just doesn't bring those tropes together to make a better point that is much more interesting than the sum of its parts. I think the action's fine. I think the cast is good. but the film just tries to throw in all these types of cliches and strings them together in this film that I just don't think gels really well. I could see why people do enjoy the film. I just found it kind of tedious after a while, and for me to not be affected by how grisly the violence was, I think just shows how ineffective it was for me. So overall, 2 stars out of 5 for me for Fury. If you like any of the reviewers I've highlighted in this episode, you can check the video description for a link to their Letterboxd profile. Be sure to give them a follow and let them know that Brad from Watch Rate Hard sent you. You can follow me on Letterboxd and X at Watch Rate Hard. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and share with your friends. I'm Brad from Watch Rate Hard. Thank you for watching, and remember, we all watch and rate movies, but you give them the heart that makes them live forever.